Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. I'm Daniel McAdams. I'll be your host today. Dr. Paul is traveling again. And we're going to make today's show kind of just a brief look at this new State Department $40 million cash infusion to what essentially is a troll farm. It's a farm, it's a place where they will create disinformation to fight disinformation. Now, the reason this is in the news is because the Pentagon is sending over $40 million to assist in funding this. It's going to more than double the fund. It's called the Global Engagement Center at the State Department. So the Pentagon's infusion of $40 million is going to more than double the budget of this. The job of this organization, now really ramped up organization, is to focus on disinformation, whether it comes from Russia or China. Originally, this was set up in the Obama administration, and it was to counter terrorist propaganda, but we were at war with East Asia. We've always been at war with East Asia. So terrorism is no longer a factor. I'm referring to Orwell there. Now it's Russia and China. We've gone back to the Cold War. And the reason for doubling the budget, we're told, is Russian meddling in our politics, in our elections, in everything, in the weather, in everything. Of course, this is unproven. We don't see anything proven yet that the Russians have meddled in anything. The Mueller indictments we've already talked about, 13 private individuals, in what may well have been a commercial activity. So unproven Russian meddling. But ironically, what is not unproven, what is proven, is that this money will be used for the U.S. to do foreign meddling. That's the whole point. It will be used to meddle in foreign countries. It'll be used to meddle in our own internal information that we receive. And it'll be used very actively. Moon of Alabama, of course, which we look at quite often, has a good post about this a couple of days ago. And they talk about Steve Goldstein, who is the Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. And he's discussing what this new ramped up Global Engagement Center will be doing. He says the U.S. will take an aggressive response to foreign disinformation. It's not merely defensive posture, he said, that we should take. We should go on the offensive. So that means that the U.S. will be creating propaganda overseas, manipulating media overseas, and creating a lot of its own disinformation and meddling. What does this mean in practical terms? It means, A, more jobs at the State Department. This money is going to open up quite a few billets, you can imagine, in this Global Engagement Center. It'll be a hot new thing, open propaganda. This is what the CIA also does in secret, of course, but this is in the open. But the other thing that struck me in looking at this is another aspect, which I think is more insidious even, and that is there's going to be a lot more money going to both U.S. and foreign NGOs, non-government organizations that toe the U.S. government's line overseas. The U.S. propaganda line on its foreign policy overseas is going to ramp up a lot of foreign organizations and ramp up a lot of NGOs. So here's what the State Department said in its press release recently about this cash infusion. It said the fund will be a key part of the Global Engagement Center's partnerships with local civil society organizations, NGOs, media providers, and content creators to counter propaganda and disinformation. So clearly they're going to be partnering with foreign and domestic NGOs, let's face it, to push the U.S. government line. And what is the U.S. government line? Well, the U.S. government line is that aggressive interventionism, aggressive military interventionism is always in the interest of the other country. We're only doing good things. Occupying 30% of Syria is a good thing. Backing up rebels, which turned out to be Al-Qaeda in Syria, is always a good thing. Everywhere we're engaged is a good thing. And if you question it, if you're a non-interventionist, for example, even if you're a realist who is not as enthused about aggressive U.S. foreign policy, you are spreading disinformation. You're undermining your government's efforts just to create peace overseas. So you see where this is heading. It's not that hard to see. There are many legitimate positions on U.S. foreign policy, but what this will do is signal out one, which is aggressive U.S. foreign policy, and subsidize that with our own money at the expense of others. So what does it mean in practical terms? You're going to see lots of funding for organizations like Hamilton 68. You've probably heard of it. You may have heard of it. It's funded through the German Marshall Fund, primarily by the U.S. government. Surprise, surprise. And they've created an amazing dashboard. They won't tell us how it works or how they do it, but it tells us what Russian bots are doing on Twitter. They'll show us trending hashtags. They won't tell us who the Russian bots are or anything about it or their methodology, but they will tell us what the Russians want us to think about. They're going to get ramped up funding. You better believe it. And what was Hamilton 68? What is it? What was it founded? Who was it founded by? Well, it was founded by Clinton foreign policy advisor Laura Rosenberger. So here is a Clinton official. Hillary Clinton's the number one person pushing the whole Russiagate thing. And here is State Department money most likely going into her organization to push the Russiagate line. Round and around we go. So the German Marshall Fund funds this Alliance for Securing Democracy, and the Hamilton 68 dashboard is under this alliance. Well, who's in this Alliance for Securing Democracy? That sounds like a good thing, right? Well, let's look at the people behind it. These are the people who are going to be defining what is foreign propaganda, defining what is Russian propaganda, defining what our tax money has to counter. These are our gatekeepers. Bill Kristol, we know him, founder of the Weekly Standard, prognosticator on television whose track record is about 0 for being right, but big-time neocon. Mike Chertoff. Remember Mike Chertoff, the guy with the color-coded warnings after 9/11 who went on to become rich selling faulty scanning machines to airports, Homeland Security. David Kramer, you may have heard of him. He runs the John McCain Institute. Couldn't be a neocon, could he? What about Mike Morrell? He's also on their board. Former acting CIA director, openly campaigned for Hillary Clinton, which was pretty unprecedented for high-ranking CIA people to openly take sides in elections, openly campaigned for Hillary Clinton, and was very involved in the creation of the whole Russiagate narrative that somehow continues to live despite the fact that it's not being given any blood infusions of truth. So there's Mike Morrell. Michael McFaul, some of you may not have heard of him. He was Obama's ambassador to Russia, discredited ambassador to Russia, and he was the one who was in Moscow and helped facilitate the U.S. coup against the elected Ukrainian government in 2014. Virulently anti-Russia. You'll see him on all the shows. A very interventionist neocon. So these are your gatekeepers. These are the people you will be paying to decide what's propaganda and what's not. So what is propaganda, Russian propaganda? According to these people, anything that contradicts their view that we need Cold War 2.0 against Russia and China and other places, that we need to have $1 trillion military budget, which enriches them, that we need to be aggressive overseas, that we need to put our troops on the borders with Russia, that we need to conduct provocative military exercises in places like Russia's border and in South Korea. Anything that questions this, anything that says, is this really an America first foreign policy? That is Russian propaganda, folks, and that is we're going to be forced to pay to have countered by our own government. If you think about it, it's chilling. Remember, not too long ago, a couple of years ago, this organization called Prop or Not, which was also murky. They were all anonymous. Why are these people so afraid of showing their faces? They won't show their faces. They won't show their methodology. They had an article citing their research on the front page of the Washington Post saying, we have unmasked Russian propagandists. And they listed about 200 organizations. The Ron Paul Institute was named as one of these organizations, along with such notable Russian outlets as the Drudge Report, Zero Hedge, Antiwar.com, Lou Rockwell, and others. In other words, anyone challenging the neocon view of aggressive foreign policy is a Russian propagandist. This money will free up a lot of resources to counter Americans. More NGOs, of course, then will chase this money. That's how it works. Here's a big pot of money. If you've got an NGO, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to go to the U.S. government and say, hey, we'd like a piece of that pie. I'll say, okay, well, what's your position? Well, our position is that we really shouldn't be that aggressive overseas. No, forget it. Next guy comes, neocon. We've got to crack down on these places like the Ron Paul Institute, the Ron Paul Liberty Report. Oh, okay, here's a grant. And that's how it works, and you know it very well. It's been proven in the past. Also, foreign NGOs will be funded with some of this money. And what they will do is overseas what the CIA also does and the State Department does, which is to make sure that in foreign countries, especially those targeted by the U.S., that only U.S. government neocon propaganda is allowed. And you think about places like Hungary, we already had a show about it earlier this year, or late last year, where the U.S. is spending millions of dollars trying to influence the Hungarian media. It's a free country. They have free elections. But somehow we're meddling in their media. It's okay when we do it. Trust me, more of this money, they've already said, is going into media. It will go to prop up the U.S. government line in these countries. So that is what's happening. That is what's being done with this $40 million troll farm. Ironically, here we go, doing to other countries exactly what they are screaming that the other countries have done to us. Oh, but it's okay when we do it to others. We're the exceptional nation. They can keep believing that. They can keep fooling themselves. But the rest of the world is not that stupid. They do understand what's going on. They do understand how they're being manipulated. These people are using our money to turn the rest of the world against us. We are the pro-patriots. We are the pro-Americans. They, I'm afraid, are not. So I hope you get a briefing of what's happening with this money, what it's going to do, the mischief it's going to cause. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be a lot more money. They're using the hysteria that they have manufactured about foreign enemies to rip us off, try to control our minds, certainly control the information we have. So what is our best defense? Is to arm ourselves with information, to not be afraid to stand up and counter these people, to ridicule them. They deserve to be ridiculed, to put them down, to expose the corruption in places like the Alliance for Securing Democracy and other NGOs. That's what we have to do, and that's what we're trying to do here at the Liberty Report. I also would encourage you to go to ronpaulinstitute.org and look at our articles there. And our companion website to this show is ronpaullibертyreport.com. So I hope you will do that, and I also hope you will come back to the Liberty Report soon. Thanks for tuning in.